God damn it. Fucking son of a bitch. Wait. 7 Deadly Sins was not that bad. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. My name is Mise and today we're going to be reviewing the anime 7 Deadly Sins and its 3rd season, not 4th, as I thought it was its 3rd season. Now, you can all probably assume that it's going to be a somewhat long and strenuous review due to the weirdness and just horrible nature of this show. In fact, I could probably make a 3-part series on why this show is just as flawed as it is. But to at least start on a positive note before I go into bash this show, the show was not that bad. And it's taking so much for me to actually go ahead and say that. Now, believe it or not, this reaction would probably not have you insinuate that I was actually a big fan of this show. As a matter of fact, if you asked me a few years ago what I would consider to be a possible contender for the new Big 3, I probably would have thrown in 7 Deadly Sins as a very viable contender. And at the time, it legitimately was. I think that it had all the elements, both good and bad, to actually become a really good Big 3 anime. And as a matter of fact, it was gaining a lot of traction within the anime community itself. So, when a Season 3 was announced for this show, you can understand that the excitement for me and the excitement from others could have actually been something worth vying for. It could have actually cemented itself as a very strong, viable contender for the new Big 3, especially in a conversation of that coming out on the year it came out. So, when we were given exactly what we were given, you can understand mine and a lot of people's frustrations with the show and how it was developed and made. Starting with the actual plot of the show, the story of it is probably the only thing that really kept me going for watching this show. Like, there was a lot of things that I took issue with, but the actual world and story it was telling, everything kind of actually coming together in fruition after 2 seasons of build-up, was actually both really satisfying and really bothering. And that's for a numerous amount of reasons. Okay, I may have over-exaggerated. It wasn't a numerous amount of reasons. But the show built up a lot of angles, a lot of stories that were actually coming into fruition. And there was so much that by the end of the show, everything wasn't resolved yet. But there were so many cliffhangers and so many untied ends that even though I might not have enjoyed the production in which it was given to us, I will still more likely watch the 4th season because I need to know exactly what happens. And you know what? A good story does that. I actually did enjoy everything that it was produced, at least story-wise. I think it was at least smart for the most part and very entertaining. However, it is to an extent because while making this review, and I took a long time to make this review because I needed to find the right way to express my frustrations and my anger, but also my pleasantries and enjoyment for the show. I have a weird love-hate relationship with the show. I do. This realization did not just come for this show. This realization came for many other shows like it. One Piece, Naruto, My Hero Academia, Black Clover, Bleach, Boruto, those type of shows, the really mainstream popular shows. Now, it's a more of a realization, but at the same time, it's also more of a theory as well. So, I am willing to debate my thought process about this with anybody in the comments whatsoever. But hear me out. Shows like these get popular, and they get a vast amount of people watching it because one of the biggest things is that people like the development of characters, the actual progression of story, because it feels like that there's a lot going on. And for shows like that, for shows like these, that is true. There are a lot of things that are going on. There is so much going on. It is what I would describe somewhat of a chaotic yet organized mess of things. It's like planned chaos. You have a lot of things happening, but they lead to somewhere. They lead to something. Sometimes. Now, a good story can have things happen, but also intertwine those things together, where each one of those things affects the other, and so on and so forth, to where you have a whole connecting universe where everything's interacting with itself. And in some cases, for some of those strands, for some of these shows, that is true. Some things interact with other things, some things do, some things don't. But for the most part, they don't. There's a lot of things that are happening in shows like Seven Deadly Sins or Naruto and One Piece, but they don't come to anything. They don't intertwine with anything. It feels like a lot, and it feels like there's a lot happening, but it's only very singular things. Things don't necessarily play off each other, and when they do, it's only for a very short period of time. This type of storytelling gives somewhat of the illusion that there is development, when in reality, there's not really. Or at least that's not considered development. There might be development in the shows. For example, I would consider Meliodas' development from trying to become a better person for the person that he loves a really big thing. It's a development. And for him to revert to that is also a regression. But eventually he does come back from that. And I'll talk about more of that a little later, probably, perhaps. But there are also many things that that don't make sense, that don't happen, that don't necessarily work with each other, but it gives this illusion that things are happening, and there's that so many things are happening that eventually, potentially, you forget that some things are happening, and so you just insinuate that those things are paired up with certain things, but they're not. This is why it was so hard for me to write this review, because I tried to get in sense of everything that I went through with this show, because I had a lot of just epiphanies and realizations when watching the Seven Deadly Sins series. It brought me to a state in which I just couldn't write. Well, I just had to put it down, and I just couldn't write. But that's how I feel like the story is. That's what the state that it put me to, because I've thought about it so much, and I don't necessarily know how to feel about that, because it's really baffling. I don't know if any of this makes sense either. I apologize if it doesn't. It sounds more of like the ramblings of a madman, but I swear that there's a point to it. I guess in order to make sense, I'll give just the summary or the TLDR of what I'm trying to say. Seven Deadly Sins has a lot going on, but none of it necessarily affects each other to an extent. Like, nothing plays off anything really. It's more of just, it happens. And that's fine. It's okay to have things happen, but some of those things need to intertwine with each other. And it happens sometimes, like I said, but not enough for it to warrant any type of actual character development or story development. Mostly story development. There are character developments, both good and bad, but at least in story-wise, like, a lot happens, and it's enjoyable, but it's not necessarily good. And that all leads down to how I feel about the story, at least, where it was fun, but it was not good. And it's fine. It's fine to have a story that is both entertaining but not good. Look at, this is not an anime thing, but look at The Room, considered one of the worst movies of all time, yet people still find enjoyment in that piece of art, or trash, or whatever you want to call it, even though it's considered one of the most movies of all time. Now, I'm not saying that Seven Deadly Sins is on that level. I would at least consider most of the mainstream anime to be way above the level of The Room. However, the same applies. This is not a good plot. it's an entertaining plot. And I can say that for a lot of the other shonens as well. But it's fine to have an entertaining plot. But we need to acknowledge the fact that entertainment and bad plots can't coexist. Just because something is entertaining does not mean it's good. Those two don't coincide all the time. And just because a plot is good doesn't mean that it has to be entertaining. There are some plots that are really well developed, that are really put together very well, but they're boring as shit. Like, they are drop dead not entertaining. This is not Seven Deadly Sins. It is not good or boring. It is fun but bad. And it is okay to be fun and bad, but you need to acknowledge that, because too many people like to assume the entertainment is good. But that's really where the compliments really stop for me in terms for this show, because there's so much more of it that just frustrated the living hell out of me. And one of the things that got me frustrated was the energy spike, or the power spike, between all but one members of the Seven Deadly Sins. And there are even members not with the Seven Deadly Sins, also allied with them, i.e. Elizabeth, that also got a power spike. Now, I will be frank, there are some power spikes that were more explained through story, such as Merlin, who we already knew was a powerful magician, and Meliodas, who we already knew was this power, who had this power. But still, just the fact that it took us 3 seasons to get to that point, and to realize such a thing, is baffling in my opinion, because I feel like there should have been at least some hint or some gesture to the point of how strong they are. I'm not saying you have to tell us the whole backstory right off the bat, but don't save such an important topic like Merlin being like blessed by both the king of the demons and the goddess of the goddess, like the big god of the goddess race, and her like being offered like protection both of them, and basically saying fuck you to both of them. What the fuck? That was something that was not explained. Or the fact that like King and Diane can both get the power level of both the Fairy King and the Giant King by just going back in time and reliving their past and making decisions not for them. Like, yes, I get, like, they explain that if you can make decisions different than us, you will be better than us. But at the same time, they also got stronger through it. Like, I'm pretty sure their power level did, in fact, spike. How? Even Gother, who I personally love as a character, right? Gother, who I appreciate. First of all, before I talk any bad about Gother, we need to sit down and we need to appreciate Gother as probably the best femboy/trap character in anime, because he gets slept on way too much. His fashion is on peak. He is very strong. He's got a sassy attitude. He's got the best pose. He's got the best catchphrase. Like, fuck Felix, fuck Astolfo, fuck all the other traps. Gother should be praised beyond belief, and in my personal opinion, that's who I would consider to be top tier fanboy/trap material. But now going back to the actual point of it, he just gets his power back, and he always had this power, but he had to go through a memory to do it, similar like King and Bond, but in a different state, because he had to remember. But Merlin knew all the time. Okay, look, this is what I'm talking about. Like, this is the most frustrating thing in terms of the Seven Deadly Sins. And this is not my typical format for reviewing. If you are new to this channel and you are here for the review, this is not my typical review. I swear to God, this is not. I just don't know how else to review this show, because it baffles me. It legitimately baffles me for how they went about all of it. Just all of it. Going back to praising Gother, though, I did at least like his backstory. Because, yes, along with the power creep, we also find out that we know he's a doll, but we finally see who's actually controlling the doll, and, you know, him being the person to actually give him, like, the sentience that he needs, but also putting him in a cave. Or I guess Gother is technically the one that stops the Holy War, and because of that, it somehow ended him up in the cave. But he also fell in love with the current king of Leonis' sister, who died young and was accused of killing her, but they had like a really sweet relationship. Like that's sweet. Like that was a really nice, sweet relationship and story. Like you could make a whole anime on that. You could make a whole anime on that story alone. As a matter of fact, you know what? If to redeem themselves, give me an OVA. Give me an OVA. Give me an OVA of just putting that more into detail. I'd rather have that be an OVA than just whatever they did with Gother after that. And the only characters that don't actually go through like a significant power spike is Escanor, because while he does reach the ability of the One, oh, don't worry, we'll get to that conversation when we get to it. We already knew how his power worked. It worked with the sun, or at least in correlation with the sun. The higher the sun is, the more stronger Escanor gets. So we already knew how strong he gets, and that's technically at one point we've already seen him with this power when he fought Estarossa when they invaded Leonis. So we've already technically seen him become the One. We just didn't know it was the One. And then there's Bond. I can make a whole video on how they disrespected my man Bond, because I'm not okay with that. First off, I love how they just said fuck it with Bond's character. Like, at the very least, for the last 2 seasons, it was really interesting to see the interaction of Elaine and Bond, and also King, and how they were whole interacting. And yeah, King's okay with Bond now being with Elaine, seeing how much he actually cared for her. But there was also the sub-story of Bond being like not as strong as the other 7 deadly sins, since they were getting stronger over time. And it even got to the point where even Elaine went to protect Bond, because Elaine is stronger than Bond technically. Oh, not technically. Elaine is definitely stronger than Bond, at least in the state that she is in right now, because I don't think she's like as weak. She got reincarnated, but she's still around, even though they did. It's a whole thing. But they didn't really like focus much on like their own relationship. It would have been nice to see a little bit of, not like total dissension, but to see it actually getting to Bond, that the person that he swore he would want to protect is now having to protect him, and it feels like he's kind of going back on his promise now because of that. And not only that, but he's not really being able to contribute power-wise to the 7 deadly sins as they fight stronger and stronger enemies. But we barely even heard from Bond, or barely even talked about Bond for most of the series. We talked about Meliodas and Elizabeth's relationship. That's fine. First of all, I do actually genuinely like how that relationship works. At first I was like, eh, but over time I actually grew to like the fact that Meliodas had to stay so quiet because of what could happen, and because of the consequences that can happen if she does remember, which, fair enough, it does at least give a legitimate explanation to why none of it was explained for the past 2 seasons, and why he personally had to keep it under wraps so badly, and his reaction to seeing Elizabeth with the goddess eyes, which is fine. And then there's King and Bond. King and Bond. And then there's King and Diane, who I liked at first, but once they got together, it seems like they became the most whatever relationship. Like, they just became just like the most bland, romantic type of relationship you can have in anime. And as soon as that happened, almost all interest was gone. It was almost as if like, oh yeah, they finally got together. Moving on. And it's like they didn't want to pay attention to them anymore, which is like fine, I guess. They finally got together. They got to the point where they needed to be. So I guess there is no progression, but I would like to see at least a little bit more development of that. Like seeing how this whole war is affecting their relationship, as if like, you know, nothing is happening. But I guess that's fine too. I guess. But Bond and Elaine do not get that same love. As a matter of fact, it almost as if you writers just kind of did stop giving a fuck about both of those people down the lane. And it does kind of suck, because it could have made for a really interesting story. It could have made for a really interesting subplot of seeing Bond getting more and more frustrated. And it would have played a little bit more to him actually going into purgatory, because with him going into purgatory the way they set it up now, it just felt like, we don't really have anything else to do with Bond, so we're just gonna send him to purgatory since he's immortal and he could just be there for however the fuck long until he comes back and he just becomes an ex machina again. But instead, they could have actually built it up to where, like, you know, it's some, rather than him just being like, oh, well, it's the captain, it's my friend, it's something I gotta do because I'm immortal. It could have actually been more of a legitimate story building of Bond realizing he's descended, and instead of him going in there, it's both to prove that he is an equal, strong member of the Seven Deadly Sins, and also as the punishment for him acting so recklessly and being so selfish and not thinking of others. Like, him, if there was a moment where, like, I'll go in because you all deserve to be here, I'm the one that's been fucking up because I've been thinking only of myself and my own power, that we're a team and I shouldn't even be worrying about something like that. And, like, that would have made it so much more powerful, and seeing him, like, push so much more for the people that he stood with. Like, yes, Bond cares about them, but Bond has also showed a level of selfishness for himself. This would be, like, the ultimate form of, like, selflessness that Bond would have ever shown in any capacity, yet they just decided to go ahead and pass that up and just forget about that whole thing, because that's what this writing does. Now, if you want to talk about weak characters, let's talk about King Arthur for a minute. King Arthur, who was so not useful in this show at all. Like, he had less screen time than Bond, I think. And at least Bond contributed in some way and could put up some of a fight. King Arthur almost seemed like he was just nothing in this. Like, yes, he was the king and he, like, saved people and he was, like, still going around town trying to make sure he could get, like, the holy sword in order to fight back against the demons. And then once he got it, it seemed like he was actually a boss, which was, you know what, for a split second, the King Arthur part was legitimately cool, because they set him up as this, like this ruler who should be more than what he is right now. And I thought, like, him getting that sword would be the moment he, like, legitimately becomes the person he needs to. And then you realize he actually didn't do shit to the demons, and he's still weak, and Merlin still has to save him. And even with Merlin saving him, he just kills himself. Like, yeah, the demon put him under a spell where he made King Arthur kill himself, but he still more or less, if you didn't know about it, still killed himself. And the sword is still lodged in his body, so I'm going to assume that either A, someone is going to plunge it from his body, and King Arthur's spirit will have the magical power it needs to defeat one of the demons, or King Arthur's just going to come back with his magical power and actually become strong. Because characters just can't stay dead in this series. I mean, I say that, but there's probably actually a few characters who legitimately did die that I'm not thinking off the top of my head. But still, the King Arthur bit did bother me very much so, because why even have him appear at all if you're just going to do that in the first place? It was such a waste of time. We could have used somebody else and had a more impactful death rather than King Arthur, who didn't do shit at all this season. Now, this is just a side note, but, and I want to preface this as this is more of a nitpick to me as well, and I don't knock it against the anime, but it's still something that kind of, sort of bugs me. So there's a movie out there called The Seven Deadly Sins, Prisoner of the Sky, and the villain for that is the Six Knights of Black. Now, the Six Knights of Black is basically the demon group right under the Ten Commandments. And that movie is supposed to be, like, not canon, so I just assume it was just a whatever group that didn't technically exist, but in the same capacity, like, could have in that world, but it was just for the movie. I always thought that was. And then when watching this series, someone makes a passing comment that on the far east or the far other end of the battlefield, there's a group of demons that are fighting, and they're called the Six Knights of Black. I thought this wasn't a canon group. When I watched the movie, I thought that movie wasn't canon. I thought this was not a canon group. But apparently, they are a canon group. And I had to look on the wiki to actually understand why they wouldn't be in the show. Because basically, they are a tier under the Ten Commandments, but they were such a rebellious group that even the Demon King said, oh, fuck that shit. Oh, no, I'm sealing you away. Or something like the goddess sealed them away with the Indra, which apparently is also a canon thing as well, I guess. Here's my thing. If the Demon King even says fuck it to them, you have characters who are stronger than them. You, as the Demon King, is stronger than them. So why not do it? Why not just kill them off? Like, you have a scene where you just kill them off. Like, Gother is like an exception, because Gother was a puppet. The reason why Gother used a puppet is because Gother got locked up by the Demon King. But there was the potential that Gother not only ended the Holy War, but if gotten powerful enough, or with his magical spellcasting abilities, could actually be a serious challenger against the Demon King. Which, fine, implying that much power exists within one person, fine. But these characters had the power level of below the Ten Commandments. You could have just sent the Ten Commandments. You could have literally sent 2 or 5 Ten Commandments to fight each one of them, and everything would have been fine. And now that you get my math wrong, you just take 5, the other just roll back, and you just kill. Make a kill team. Half the Ten Commandments, just split the load. Kill 3 at a time. 5 of you guys kill 1, 2, 3. The other you kill 1, 2, 3. I don't know. It's such a nitpick, and I don't even mean to. I'm not even counting it against the anime, but it's something that bothers me. It's like, if you're gonna name drop in the show, at least have them appear, because there's people like me who watch the show, and then I hear the name 6 Nights of Black, so I'm super psyched a little bit, because that group was actually legitimately cool. So I'm like, oh shit, we're gonna get a fucking 6 Nights of Black's appearance in the actual show. That's actually pretty legit. They're gonna make it like canon. And they made it canon, but they don't show them, which is very annoying to me. That definitely bothers me. Now, I will go ahead and say this, like I said in the beginning. I'm going to start off with at least positive note, and then we'll work into that. While, yes, there are problems with this season's animation, the animation for 7 Deadly Sins in general, it wasn't great to begin with. Yes, there were really neat fight scenes, such as Escanor and Estarossa, and King versus Bon, and Bon versus Meliodas. However, there was nothing superb about those. You didn't see, people taking those fights and being like, oh, this is a raw fight, this is a cool fight. It's not on that same level. Because A, the fights were okay, and B, the animation on those wasn't very spectacular. When I think about major upgrades that really impact the show, I think of One Punch Man Season 1 and One Punch Man Season 2, where you had the fucking god tier Saitama versus his disciple, who I'm unfortunately forgetting the name of, but the Cyborg Man. And that fight was raw. You had him versus the villain of the end of the season, which that was a raw fight. And then, even though there was good fights in the second season, it was still a drastic upgrade. You notice, whoa, that took a significant downgrade. Holy shit, that took a significant downgrade. But 7 Deadly Sins, for the most part, it stayed pretty normal for the most part. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that too. I know I'm gonna get a hate later, oh, you can't tell, blah blah blah. No, dude, at least the typical walking around, conversation scenes, all that stuff. For the most part, the scenes were pretty still normal from the other ones. Yes, there were a few things here and there where I sat there and I was there's a little difference, and I can tell. But for the most part, like, it still felt pretty much the same from the last 2 seasons. There are some definitely noticeable difference. Like, I didn't really see much of the CGI use in season 2, where the scene where Bond is carrying Jericho after wow, I'm forgetting the other one of the demons' name, but the one that Escanor ends up beating in that game, throwing rocks at them and stuff like that, and like actually seeing the smoothness of the rock that was CGI going in the air and actually bouncing. That was like some pretty good animation. I didn't really see that here in season 3. However, for the most part, like, the characters still are a little stiff. Like, the world, atmosphere, and the background still feel the same. But that's not what you wanted to hear, huh? That's not why you came here. You wanted to know my opinion on Escanor versus Meliodas. This fight was supposed to be a top tier fight. One of the best fights in the show. Potentially a top tier fight for that season, for that year. This fight was supposed to be legit. It was supposed to be raw. It was supposed to be fire. There was so much that was supposed to happen. It was supposed to be a good animated fight. Even if you gave it animation from season 2 and 1, it would have still been a fight that everyone wanted to see. You had Meliodas in Saltmore versus Escanor slowly building up his power to reach to the 1. This was a fight that was supposed to be raw, that was supposed to be dope. It was supposed to be a legit fight. And you fucked it. You ruined it. You massacred my boys because of it. Like, the show already felt kind of stilted, but this was stilted. This was bad. This was not good. This was not okay. This was not great. This was not great. This was not great. This was not good. This was not average. This was bad. Borderline bad. Doo-doo. This was terrible. This was horrible. This was trash. This was legit trash. This was just straight up legit trash. No, it was bad. That fight, that scene, that whole thing was bad. And you want to know what baffles me the most about this? You want to know what baffles me the most about this? The thing that baffles me the most is that this came out at a time. It might have been a little bit before. Still, this came out at a time where you had stuff like Promised Neverland, Vinland Saga, Mob Psycho, Demon Slayer, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Golden Wind, Dr. Stone, Fire Force. Like, these were shows that were not only some of the best animated shows in a very long time, but they were top tier. I'm talking about 2019 was the year of probably the best animation, the best consistent animation like ever, whatsoever. I can only really go back and think of 90s anime that were like on that same level of hype, but that's more for nostalgic reasons, and a lot of Miyazaki's had to do with that, but that's beside the point. You came out of a year where animation was not only popping, but was one of the best years for animation of all time. Yet somehow you had the audacity, the disrespect, the honest to God horrible decision to release something like that. And I hate being mad like that and insulting things like that, because I can understand that, and working on stuff like this is hard, especially depending on how your studio works around it and how the schedule for the TV show could be. Sometimes you work on the whole series. Sometimes you literally work on it week to week to week, and you just spend your whole time within the office working. So I always feel just a tiny bit bad for people who I have to like criticize their work and just say that I don't like it or I don't consider it good. And like, again, I'm not a critic. I'm just a random fucking fat dude on the internet that's talking about anime. But it still hurts because I get that these people put so much effort and so much work into giving us the medium that we all love and enjoy. But this was not a medium that you should have put out. I don't even know how something so stilted and bad was allowed. That's the thing that baffles me the most, is that this piece was allowed to air. It was allowed to be produced. Like, I get it, you might have been in a crunch wrench, you might have needed to do something, you might have needed to take shortcuts. But, man, there's so much you could have done to just prevent that. There was so much you could have done to prevent how bad and shitty and horrible it was. And you don't even have shit like the pandemic to fucking fall on to say, oh, we can't really do it well. Because at least then there's an excuse and there's like a little bit of forgiveness. You had all the time. You had all the time. You somehow put out this abomination of a fight. And it sucks. Because I actually like this fight. I actually think this fight was raw. I actually think that this fight was a legitimate good fight in the manga. And then you ruined it in the anime. This is why people read manga. This is why people read manga, because nothing like this gets that fucked up in manga. This makes me want to pick up a manga. This makes me want to go and just read manga and just not do anime, because that's how horrible it was. And yeah, I might be a little overreacting. I might be a little bit insulted, but I like this. I wanted this to be a legit fight. And now, I know for a fact that later down the road, we're going to get something equally as dope, if not more than this. And if they fuck up on that, I swear to God, I am going to find the person who animated that scene, and I am going to murder them beyond belief. In a video game. In a video game. I'm going to murder them in a video game. All in all, while I did enjoy it, this is not a good watch. It was fun, but it was not good. I definitely sat there, and it's weird because I have a love-hate relationship with this show now. And that's on the same level as I do, like I said before, with the Narutos and the One Pieces and the Bleaches and the My Hero Academias. This is not good. This is not a good show. Yet I am entertained, and I will probably watch the fourth season because I am a whore for things like this. And the rest of us are too. And that's just how it is too. I'm so frustrated over the fact that I enjoyed this because I wanted to. I don't want to enjoy it because it's bad. The show was not great. And it took me so long to actually sit there and make a review that I can legitimately actually put out, because I watched this months ago. I watched this months ago. Let me just say that. I watched this months ago, and for the longest time, I had to not put out a review because I didn't know how to do it. The last 2 or 3 reviews I did were already reviews that I pre-made and saved for in case something like this happens, or in case I didn't want to. The B-Stars, the Space Luco, the BNA, I had those in my back pocket just to save for a later day so I could do this. I didn't even get that. I didn't even get 3 out of 10. I give this show a 3 out of 10. I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm not even gonna say my ad shows or anything. I need to go. This is a lot. Thank you for watching. I need to go. I'm done. I don't want to watch this anymore. I don't want to talk about this anymore.